We were camped in Shittim. Shittim was a city a few miles east of the Jordan River. Joshua had given us his command to prepare our provisions, because within 3 days we were going to cross over that very Jordan into the land that the Lord our God was giving us to possess. After 40 years of wandering in the wilderness, we were finally poised to enter into the land God promised our forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We were on the verge, on the cusp. We were on the very doorstep of the promised land. We were on the doorstep of God fulfilling his long-awaited promise he made to us. God had brought us to this place. The excitement and anticipation around camp was at an all-time high. As we were busy with preparations and attending to other matters, I, along with another fellow Israelite, was summoned to go and meet with Joshua. At the time, I didn't know what this meeting was about. Nevertheless, I got myself together and I headed to meet with my leader. It became quickly apparent to the both of us that this was a highly classified meeting. Not only because it was just the three of us, but it was also because of the nature of the task Joshua had given to us to attend to. You see, we were being sent on a covert reconnaissance mission. Go, Joshua said to us, view the land, especially Jericho. Yes, I am, and I was, one of the two spies Joshua sent to Jericho. One of two. That's interesting to me. When it was happening, I don't necessarily claim to know Joshua's thoughts on the matter, but it does seem kind of interesting that he only selected two of us. I mean, it's quite possible that maybe he learned from his predecessor Moses in terms of what happened to him, what he had to deal with. If you recall, Moses sent out 12 spies. 10 of them came back with a bad report. And only 2 came back with a good report, among whom one of which happened to be Joshua himself. Again, I don't mean to speculate. It's just interesting to me that maybe Joshua had that in mind. But nevertheless, if you ask me, I think that was, if he did it for that reason, I think it's a good leadership lesson. I think it's a good mark of a good, humble, godly leader. And that is someone who is willing and able to learn from others' past examples, their experiences, and even their errors. But that's a lesson for another time. So here we are, 2 spies sent out secretly by Joshua. No one was to know about what we were up to. We couldn't tell our family. We couldn't tell our close relatives. We couldn't tell our friends. No one in Israel was to know what we were being sent out to do? What will we encounter along the way? If we were confronted, what were we supposed to say? What would happen once we arrived in Jericho? Regardless of the questions that might have went across our minds or come across our minds, one thing was for certain. We were not going to let what we did not know stop us from completing the task related to God's purposes and plan for his life, for our life as his people. You see, you as believers in Yahweh, like me, we can face the unknown when you know and serve an all-knowing God. Amen. Yeah. So later on that day, we tiptoed out of camp, went to cross over the Jordan River by way of what they call the fords. These were passageways that could be taken to cross over. Once we crossed over, we continued on to Jericho. When we finally reached our destination, man, it was a sight to behold. One reason was because of Jericho's fertility. The land was green and lush and plush. I mean, it was just a wonderful scenery of God's nature. It was more than likely due to the fact that they had an impressive irrigation system that ran throughout the entire city. Jericho was an oasis in a desert, arid-like region. But that wasn't the only thing, and really the primary thing that didn't impress us. The primary thing that impressed us was not the land's fertility, it was the city's fortification. You see, Jericho, for one, was situated on top of a hill. I don't know if any of you all are familiar with conquest or military operations, but to have your city built on top of a hill meant that if anybody was trying to attack you, they had to come up to you. They had to climb up. They had to march upward into your city. And if anybody knows anything about war, it leaves you at a considerable disadvantage as an attacker, because the city and the persons you are attacking can just simply pick you off from their vantage point. But you know what was Jericho was what they were really known for in terms of their fortification? Wasn't necessarily that they sat on the hill. They were known for this huge, large, 30-foot tall wall that encircled their city. It was the sights of something that we have rarely seen. We knew about Jericho. We knew it was a significant city. We knew that many people came to Jericho. For you to get into Canaan, to come from the east, Jericho was a signal city, bustling with all kinds of activities. And they then knew that as a city, they needed to protect themselves. And they built this humongous, what you would consider a double wall. Had an exterior wall and an interior wall that there was some space in between it, and it was super thick. Jericho was, for all intents and purposes, impenetrable. It was impenetrable. It would take a miracle for somebody to get past those walls. It would take an act of God for someone to conquer that city. Well, we made it through the city gate, and we ended up in a woman's house by the name of Rahab. Rahab was a prostitute. Now, don't get it twisted. We were the people of God, set aside for God's purposes. We had not gone there to partake in or patronize her business operation. We went on a holy mission to spy out the land. You may ask yourself, why Rahab's house? Well, as you say in your terminology, hindsight is 20/20, yes? I think you'll find out why Rahab's house as you continue on hearing my story. Though we tried to keep a low profile, we had hopes to get into the city undetected, we were found out. Someone had discovered us and sent word to the king of Jericho that we had come to search out the land. In light of our cover being blown, would Rahab ask us to leave? It just so happened that instead of putting us out, she hurried us up onto the flat roof of her house. And there she hid us amongst the stalks of flax that she had laid out to dry. This flax was a plant that they harvested. They would take the plant and they would cut off the stalks and they would soak them in water for a few days. After which they would take them out, and it was customary. They would take them on to their flat roofs and lay them out to be dried by the sun. And after this flax was dried, the fiber would then begin to be easily peeled off of these stalks, and they would make linen from it. But also they made cords and ropes. So there we are, hidden within these stacks of flax that she had laid out to dry. When soon after that, there was a knock at the door. The king had sent men to the house to apprehend us. Which you can imagine that if we were apprehended, we were going to be imprisoned and more than likely executed. They said to Rahab, "Bring out the men who have come to you, who entered your house, for they have come to search out all the land." We had been made. As we lay there motionless, we heard someone climbing up the ladder to where we were. Was it one of the king's men? No. It was Rahab. It just so happened that she had told the men that we indeed did come to her house, but that she did not know where we had come from. And it just so happened that she told them that before the gate of the city was closed for the evening, that we had actually left and that she didn't even know where we went. And she told them, "Quick, if you move fast, you can catch them, you can overtake them, go quickly and pursue them, and you will overtake them." And did you know? It just so happened that they took her word for it. They immediately left the city, headed towards the Jordan River without even bothering to search the house. Why would this woman, this Canaanite woman, risk so much to help us? I think you would know that if she was caught, that it was treasonous, a crime that was punishable by death, and yet she risked it all. Why? Well, why was she so favorably disposed to saving us from being captured? Well, it just so happened that this woman, Rahab, this paganistic, idol-worshiping prostitute, had actually come to believe in Yahweh, the one and only true and living God, our Yahweh. She had expressed faith in God. I didn't discern that. My fellow Israelite didn't discern that. God didn't give us some vision or some dream to reveal to us that she was a fellow believer. No, we came into that knowledge by her own confession. When we were on that roof, she came up to the roof after the pursuers had left, and this is what she said. She said, I know that the Lord has given you the land, and that the fear of you has fallen upon us, and that all the inhabitants of the land melt away before you. For we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea before you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to the two kings of the Amorites beyond the Jordan, King Sihon and Og, and how y'all devoted them to destruction. And as soon as we heard it, our hearts melted. There was no spirit left in any man because of you. For the Lord your God, He is God in the heavens above and on the earth beneath. Wow. It just so happened that Rahab believed in our God. Rahab knew that her people and the city of Jericho were in the line of God's sight of His coming righteous judgment against them. He knew that they were next in, she knew rather that they were next in line for them to be devoted to righteous destruction. And so in light of this, she pleaded with us. She wanted us to deal with her with hesed. This is a Hebrew word for us that meant loving kindness. And she wanted us to deal kindly with her and her family as she had dealt with hesed towards us. She wanted us to make a pledge by the Lord and give her a sure sign that we would save alive her father and mother and all of her brothers and sisters and all who had belonged to them. And so we did. We told her, our life for yours, even to death. We told her, if you do not tell this business of ours, then when the Lord brings us and when He gives us this land, we will deal kindly and faithfully with you. Before we left the city, we had to set a couple of conditions around this oath that we swore to Rahab. First, we instructed her to tie this scarlet cord in her window so that her house could be easily identifiable by us when we approached and came into the city. We told her, secondly, that she was also to gather all of her family into her house and remain there. And that if any one of them went out of the house, on the day of our invasion, his or her blood would be on his or on her own head, and we would be held guiltless. But if any harm came to any one of them that remained in her house, then we would be held accountable for that. And finally, we just reiterated to her that if she told anyone what we were up to, if she told anyone about that, the business of us spying, the business of us coming into the city to scope it out, that the oath we swore to her would be invalid. It would be null and void. The time had come for us to leave the city, but there was a problem. The main gate of the city had already been shut and secured. How were we supposed to leave the city unnoticed? You do understand, Rahab just couldn't take us by the hand and simply escort us to the front gate and walk us out. We would have been easily spotted and therefore captured. Well, it just so happened that Rahab's house was built into the city wall. The window of her house, one of them, was built into the exterior city wall. It was through this window that she would let us down by a rope, which allowed us to escape the city undetected. As directed, we headed into the opposite direction of the pursuers, into what was called the hill country. Rahab told us to stay there for 3 days before we headed back to Shittim. And so after 3 days, we came out of hiding and began to make our trek back to our people. And it just so happened that the pursuers had already caught off their search, made their way back to the city of Jericho, allowing us to make safe passage back to our camp on the other side of the Jordan River. When we made it back to camp, we were elated. We immediately went to report to Joshua. We couldn't wait to tell him all that had happened to us. We said to him, all the inhabitants of the land melt away before us. Truly, the Lord has given all the land into our hands. Truly, the Lord has given all of the land into our hands. At first sight, all of the incidences that we experience may seem to some people to be simply coincidental. But we know better. What may have appeared to have been random coincidence was actually divine providence. It wasn't luck that landed us in Rahab's house. It wasn't luck that landed us in Rahab's house, who was a former pagan idol worshiper who had come to believe in Yahweh. It wasn't luck that landed us in Rahab's house, who was a former paganistic idol worshiper prostitute who had come to believe in Yahweh, whose house was built in the city wall with a window built in the exterior city wall. It was not luck. It was the Lord. And I was invited here to just tell you my story, but if I can just encourage you and tell you, it wasn't luck that landed you where you are either.
Yeah. Right. Amen. That's right. That's right.
It was the Lord. It wasn't luck. And it wasn't chance that prevented us from running into the king's men on our way back to camp. It wasn't chance. That made Rahab tell us to stay in the hill country for 3 days. And only after 3 days were we to come out of hiding at the very exact time that they caught off the search and the pursuers had made their way back into the city of Jericho. It was not chance. It was our Creator who divinely orchestrated every move in our journey. It wasn't chance. It was God at work on our behalf to bring about His good promise to us as His people. And here's what I hope and pray you take away from our time together this morning. And hear me well. God will sovereignly work in, through, and in spite of human affairs to bring to pass His good purposes, plans, and promises for your life. No formidable opposition can stop it. No towering obstacle can prevent His will from coming to pass in your life. And no deviant, scheming, wicked operation can hinder what God wants to take place in your life. Wow. As you would say it, what God has for you is for you. So don't fret over your future. Don't fret over it, because God is already there in your future. And He has lined up people, resources, and connections to bring about His will for your life. I want to encourage you to learn from my story. Don't get bogged down in the details either. Don't get so bogged down in the details to where you don't move in obedience to God due to you not knowing every single bit of the game plan. Do you think we knew everything that was going to happen? No. We didn't know who we were going to meet. We didn't know we were going to meet Rahab. We didn't know we were going to be in her house. We didn't know her house was built in the wall, but we trusted God. Even though we didn't know everything, we still went. I don't know who is here this morning, but I hope you are encouraged by my story to obey God and go even when you don't know.
Yeah, that's good.
Because God knows. And there are some blanks that He will not fill in until you go, until you are obedient, until you give, until you serve, until you join, until you obey. Then and only then will God fill in certain blanks in your life. God will make what is unclear clear later. You just need to simply act on what He has made clear for you to do now.
That's right.
So keep trusting and obeying God. He will orchestrate all things together for your good and His glory. He did it for me.
Yeah.
He did it for us. And He will do the same for you.